Hey everyone, ready to dive into Kansas City real estate? We're going to figure out if it's the right spot for you to grow your portfolio in 2025. We've got blog posts, articles, even a YouTube video from Alpine Property Management who's kind of making a name for themselves out there.
Yeah, and it's interesting. A lot of what makes for a smart investment in KC applies anywhere. Like if you want to expand your real estate horizons, it's pretty universal stuff.
Okay, so how do you even know if you're ready to take on more properties? I was looking at Alpine's blog, 5 signs you're ready to expand, and they talk about cash flow, access to capital, and having a solid investment strategy. Those seem pretty key.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how Alpine emphasizes those points. Like positive cash flow, that's your foundation. If your existing properties aren't bringing in more than they cost you, taking on more gets risky fast.
Right. Makes sense. And they mentioned reinvesting profits like a snowball thing.
Exactly. Using that cash flow to fuel more investments, that's classic wealth building over time. But cash flow alone isn't always enough. Access to capital, that's huge. Alpine really hits on that too.
Yeah, especially in a competitive market.
Yeah.
Savings, equity, financing, you got to be able to make competitive offers. They even mentioned the 1031 exchanges. Pretty advanced stuff, right? Deferring those capital gains taxes.
It is. It reminds you that expanding your portfolio means you got to understand the financial tools. But what I find interesting is how Alpine emphasizes having an investment strategy, not just buying whatever's out there.
Right, you got to have a plan. Like, you wouldn't go grocery shopping without a list, right?
Yeah.
Defining your risks, your expected ROI, your exit strategy, whether you want to hold long-term, refinance, sell eventually.
Absolutely. And that strategy should factor in what type of property you want, single family, multifamily, mixed use. Casey's got a diverse market, so knowing what fits your goals is key.
Okay, so let's talk tenants. Alpine's got this blog post, The Art of Tenant Screening. They really hammer home how important good tenants are.
And for good reason. Reliable tenants protect your investment, ensure consistent cash flow. What impressed me about Alpine is their detailed screening process. It really seems like they try to minimize risk right from the start.
Yeah, they do credit checks, income verification, rental history, even background checks. They even told this story about a landlord who skipped screening and lost thousands because of a bad tenant.
Yikes, that's a cautionary tale. It shows why thorough screening is so important. It's not just about avoiding headaches, it's about protecting your money and your peace of mind.
Speaking of peace of mind, let's look at Alpine's YouTube channel. Their video, Why Kansas City Landlords Are Choosing Alpine, really shows what they offer, especially for people who might not be local to KC.
Yeah, one thing that stood out to me was their focus on tenant placement. They seem to get that finding good tenants is more than just a for rent sign.
Totally. They use professional photos, good descriptions, listing sites to make sure the right people see your property.
Yeah.
They even offer flexible showing times, to accommodate people.
And they have this strategy that, like, they start marketing a property before the current tenant moves out, minimizes those vacancy periods, and keeps that income coming.
Yeah, time is money.
Yeah.
And speaking of things that can eat into your profits, maintenance, that's another place where Alpine seems to really stand out.
Yeah, they've got a whole system in place, vetted contractors, 24/7 emergency line for, those unexpected things. Plus, they do routine inspections to catch small problems before they turn into big, expensive ones.
It's like they're taking care of your property like it's their own.
Yeah.
I bet that's a huge relief for landlords, especially if they're not living in KC.
Totally. And their focus on transparency is really good too. Landlords get this online portal where they can see everything, financials, maintenance updates, even the lease agreements, all in real time.
It's like taking the guesswork out of it and giving you back control,
Sure.
right? They really seem to want their clients to feel informed every step of the way.
That level of communication builds trust and helps relieve a lot of the stress of being a landlord. Whether you're local or out of state, that's big.
For sure. Now, rent collection and lease enforcement, those can be tricky areas. What did you think about how Alpine handles those?
Yeah, they're very systematic. They offer online rent collection, have strict policies to make sure rent's paid on time. Plus, they handle all the lease enforcement stuff, even evictions if it comes to that.
It's almost like having a legal team on call, ready to handle any tough situations.
Yeah.
That kind of support can be a game changer for landlords. Lets them focus on the bigger picture.
Right. It's a good example of how Alpine tries to be a one-stop shop for real estate solutions. They even buy houses, which is helpful for landlords who maybe have a property that needs a ton of work or just want to cash out quickly.
Yeah, they seem really plugged into the KC market, and they understand what landlords need. They're positioning themselves as that trusted partner, someone who can guide you through all the decisions.
Yeah, speaking of guidance, their blog post, Your roadmap to a successful 2025 makes a strong argument for why having professional property management can be so helpful, especially in a competitive market like KC.
It makes sense. They talk about how a good property manager handles the day-to-day stuff, letting you focus on your bigger financial goals. Plus, they can help you adapt to what tenants expect, navigate the regulations, aim for higher occupancy rates, all that.
It's all about using their expertise to get better returns and, importantly, free up your time so you can pursue other opportunities. Sounds like a win-win to me.
I liked how they emphasize proactive communication with tenants, too. It's about building trust and having good relationships, which means happier tenants and they're more likely to renew.
Which translates into more stability and predictability for the landlord. It's all connected.
We've already talked about tenant screening, but I think it's worth mentioning how much Alpine reinforces how important it is in this Roadmap to Success post.
Yeah, they really hammer home that choosing the right tenants is the foundation. Their whole screening process, credit checks, background checks, rental history, it's all about minimizing risk down the road.
It's about stopping headaches before they start, dealing with evictions, property damage, legal stuff that gets costly and eats up your time.
Absolutely. Alpine screening is all about finding tenants who will respect your property, pay on time, and basically make your life easier.
And then there's maintenance and upkeep. Easy to overlook, but so crucial for keeping your property valuable.
It's not just about fixing things when they break. It's about being proactive. Alpine's big on routine inspections, timely repairs, having that network of reliable contractors ready.
They make it sound like it actually saves you money in the long run, too. Catch those small problems early, and you might avoid bigger expenses later. Plus, a well-maintained property probably goes up in value. That's a win for any landlord.
I was also intrigued by how Alpine approaches maximizing rental income. They seem to have this data-driven strategy, staying on top of market trends and setting competitive rates.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, right? Attracting tenants, but also making sure your investment is profitable. And they suggest some interesting ideas like strategic property improvements.
Right, like updating kitchens or making things more energy efficient. That can justify rent increases and you get a better return. They're always thinking about how to add value for both the tenant and the landlord.
And one last thing that stood out to me from all their materials is the idea of building the right support system as you grow your portfolio.
Yeah, they really make a good case for how a professional property management company like Alpine can make expanding your holdings a lot less daunting. With someone handling the day-to-day stuff, you're free to pursue those growth opportunities.
And they talk about how a well-managed property is more likely to weather market changes and keep its value over time.
It's about creating a resilient portfolio, something that can handle the ups and downs of real estate.
We've covered a lot, but there's so much more. Let's take a quick pause and come back to talk more about maximizing rental income and figuring out what tenants want these days. It's always changing.
You know, one thing that really stood out to me about Alpine is how they're always looking ahead. It's like they're not just reacting to changes in the KC market, they're anticipating them.
It's like they have this sixth sense for what's going to happen next. And for landlords, being proactive like that can make a huge difference, especially if you're trying to maximize your returns.
Exactly. Take their advice on maximizing rental income. In their YouTube video, they talk about staying on top of market trends and being willing to adjust rental rates. They even suggest strategic upgrades to attract tenants who can pay more.
Yeah. They mentioned stuff like in-unit laundry or covered parking, things that make a place nicer so you can maybe charge a little more rent. It's about making the property more valuable for the renter, but also, boosting your profits.
And it's not just about fancy amenities. They also talked about energy efficiency. That's becoming more and more important. With utility costs going up, tenants are looking for ways to save money each month.
Yeah, that makes sense. Putting in energy-efficient appliances or even just adding insulation, those things can make your property more attractive to renters. And it might even save you money on your operating costs over time.
It's a win-win for sure. And speaking of attracting tenants, Alpine also talked about marketing. You got to market your property effectively, especially in a competitive market like Kansas City. They were really big on having high-quality photos, writing good descriptions, and using those popular listing websites.
Oh yeah, and being responsive. They talked about answering inquiries quickly, scheduling showings fast, and even being flexible with the showing times so you can work with people's busy schedules.
It's all about making the whole rental process easy and convenient. Renters today, they expect quick responses and they want information easily.
Right. If you're not keeping up with that, they might just move on to the next listing. It seems like Alpine really tries to streamline everything from marketing and tenant screening to signing leases and just like communicating throughout.
Absolutely. They understand that a good rental experience leads to happy tenants, and happy tenants are more likely to stay, which ultimately means a more profitable investment for the landlord.
Now let's talk taxes. Alpine briefly mentioned it in their YouTube video, reminding landlords to take all those tax deductions and credits that are available.
Oh, yeah, taxes are a huge part of the equation. As a rental property owner, you can deduct things like mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance premiums, even maintenance expenses, and don't forget about depreciation.
It's so important to keep track of all your income and expenses throughout the year. That way you can maximize those deductions when it's time to file your taxes.
And they even suggest talking to a tax professional to make sure you're not missing out on any opportunities to save money. It's always good to have an expert on your side when it comes to taxes.
Like they can be so complicated. So Alpine didn't give any specific predictions for the KC market in 2025, but they did talk about some of the trends and challenges that landlords might face.
Yeah, they pointed out things like rising tenant expectations, more regulations, and the constant pressure to keep up with maintenance costs. Those are all things you got to consider if you're thinking about investing in rentals in Kansas City.
And they also mentioned the growing demand for amenities, plus the fact that technology is playing a bigger role in property management. Landlords need to be adaptable and proactive these days.
The market's definitely changing, and the people who are willing to adapt, use technology, and really focus on tenant satisfaction are probably going to be the most successful.
Well, something else Alpine mentioned that I think is worth repeating is having a financial cushion.
Hmm.
They recommended setting aside like 10% of your rental income each month for unexpected expenses.
Yeah, it's like they say, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. You never know what could happen. A pipe could burst, the roof could leak, an appliance could break. Having that emergency fund can save you a lot of stress.
It's all about peace of mind. And speaking of that, Alpine also emphasized reviewing your insurance coverage, making sure your rental properties are properly protected against risks.
Oh, absolutely. You want to make sure you have enough covered for property damage, liability claims, and even loss of rental income if something happens.
Yeah, they said to check your insurance policies every year and think about whether you need more coverage, especially if things have changed with your property or the market.
It's a simple thing to do that can save you a lot of headaches later.
Another point that came up a few times in Alpine stuff was staying informed about local rental regulations and landlord-tenant laws.
Yeah, got to stay up to date on any changes in the laws, eviction moratoriums, tenant rights, all that. You need to make sure you're operating legally and not doing anything that could cause problems.
They recommended keeping an eye on changes to the laws, going to industry events, even talking to a lawyer to make sure you're in compliance and avoid any mistakes that could hurt your investment.
Yeah, it's worth taking the time to understand the legal side of things. Property management can be tricky, so it's better to be safe than sorry.
And one last thing I wanted to bring up, something Alpine kind of subtly highlighted throughout their materials, is the importance of building a strong team.
Yeah, they talked about how their own team works together to provide all those property management services, tenant screening, lease enforcement, maintenance, financial reporting, everything.
It's like this well-coordinated system. Everyone plays a part. And it made me think about how landlords should also build their own network of people they can trust.
Having a team of lawyers, accountants, contractors, even other investors can make a big difference. It can really help you navigate the market and reach your goals.
Okay, so as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what stands out to you as the most important takeaway from all this Alpine stuff? What's that one piece of advice that every landlord, no matter where they are, should really listen to?
That's a great question. I think the biggest takeaway is that Alpine is all about being proactive and strategic with property management. Whether it's tenant screening, maintenance, marketing, or planning your finances, they emphasize anticipating challenges, staying informed, and making decisions based on data.
It's not just about fixing problems when they pop up. It's about creating systems and processes that help you prevent those problems.
Exactly. And it's about always looking for ways to improve, whether that's through learning more, talking to other professionals, or just staying curious about what's happening in the world of real estate.
Well said. I think that's a perfect way to transition into our final thoughts on the Kansas City real estate market and how Alpine can help you succeed there. Okay, so we've talked about the Kansas City real estate market and what to think about if you're going to grow your portfolio there. From finding tenants and handling maintenance to the financial stuff, it seems like a company like Alpine can make things a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things we've learned today. Alpine really shows how professional property management can take away a lot of the stress of being a landlord, especially if you don't live in Kansas City.
So let's say you are seriously thinking about investing in KC real estate. Based on what we've talked about, what's one question you'd want to research more? Like, what's that next step to make a really smart decision?
Good question. I'd say look closer at the different neighborhoods in Kansas City. Figure out which ones match your investment goals and how much risk you're comfortable with. Alpine talks about analyzing the market and finding areas that are likely to go up in value, but that's where the real work begins.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the hype, but you got to understand what each neighborhood is really like.
Exactly. Rental rates, vacancy rates, how much growth is expected for, those things can be totally different depending on the neighborhood. You got to understand those little details to pick the right property.
And remember, we've talked a lot about Alpine Property Management, but they're not the only company out there.
Right. It's always smart to compare different companies and their services. Find the one that really fits what you need and how you like to invest.
Absolutely. Do your research on property management companies just like you do on properties. But if you're curious about Alpine, I think they do free consultations.
Yeah, they do. Their number is 816-343-4520. It's a great chance to talk to them, see how they do things, and find out if they're a good fit for you.
Even if you end up going with a different company or managing properties on your own, that consultation could be really helpful.
You'll learn things that can help you make better decisions no matter what you decide.
We've covered a lot today. We talked about the potential of the Kansas City real estate market, the important things to think about when you're adding to your portfolio, and how important it is to choose the right tenants, keep up with maintenance, plan your finances, and have a good team.
And we saw how a company like Alpine Property Management can help you understand the market and reach your goals.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into Kansas City real estate. Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know, the better decisions you can make. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, happy investing.